They say the end begins with a bang. Mine began with the smallest sound, a wineglass setting itself down, quietly, as if it didn't want to wake the sleeping life we'd built. And for the first time, I realized the house knew my name better than the man who slept in it. I am Leela Hart, wife for 38 years, mother of one daughter who moved 2 time zones away, keeper of rituals and reminders, rehearsed in kindness and careful in silence. My husband, Victor, believes in doing things right, rakes leaves in straight lines, folds sweaters like a promise, loves me the way a lighthouse loves the ships it will never board. In early November, the city went quiet after a storm, and the neighborhood smelled like wet cedar and old paper, the kind of smell that summons older versions of a person to the front of the room. I found myself at the Community Arts Center to drop off donations for a fundraiser. Frames, ribbons, blank canvases, objects waiting for a story to choose them. That's where I met Rowan Hale, the curator with the laugh that sounded like he had stored sunlight in his chest for emergencies. He was younger than me by a decade, though the grief in his eyes made him ageless. He was polite, precise, and noticed things the way some people listen to distant thunder and can tell you if you should bring the laundry in. "What do you do?" he asked, like the question could open a window. "I keep things going," I said. It was the closest thing to truth that felt safe. He showed me a painting, unsettling and honest, of a woman standing in a kitchen with her back to a door that was already open, and I felt an ache move through me like a migrating season. "It's called threshold," he said. "Sometimes the doorway is the problem." I smiled, but my palms remembered the shape of a knob I hadn't turned. I didn't plan a secret, I planned dinner. Leftovers, because we were saving for a long-promised trip that kept moving down the calendar like a guest we were too tired to host. Victor told me about a colleague's retirement party and a new lawn mower that could be financed at 0% APR, and I said the right things in the right order. After he fell asleep to a crime show that solved everyone else's trouble, I stood in the dark hallway feeling like an unplayed note. I emailed the Arts Center to confirm the donation receipt and ended up writing. "The painting with the open door. Does the woman ever turn around?" Rowan replied at 1:06 a.m. "Only when she remembers her name." The next morning, I made oatmeal and pretended not to know what the body knows when it finally hears its name spoken aloud. We didn't begin with a kiss. We began with permission to speak of weather that wasn't in the sky. I volunteered at the Arts Center on Thursdays, filing, labeling, carrying small things carefully like I was practicing for something larger. And I learned that people who live around paintings develop a respect for what happens when you stand still and let color tell the truth. Rowan was not flirty. He was attentive, which is more dangerous because it feels like water when a person didn't realize they were thirsty. He asked what music kept me company when I cooked, and I said something about old jazz records and the sound of rain. He said, "That's the sound of mercy," and I laughed while my hands went still. He told me his father had left when he was 12 and came back when he was 30 with apologies that didn't fit. He said he curated because he believed arrangement could be a kind of love. I told him Victor saved receipts for years, just in case, and how I sometimes resented being planned for instead of wanted, and then I felt the sharp relief of saying a thing that had been pressed under a heavy book. Our first touch was an accident with intention underneath it, brushing past in a narrow doorway, the soft echo of skin recognizing weather. The second was not. He handed me a photograph to label, and our fingers met in the center like strangers who already understood the choreography of a crowd. He said, "Careful," and I wanted to ask him to define the word. I went home that evening and underlined a sentence in a book I hadn't opened in a decade. "We are each responsible for our own awakenings." Victor returned late, tired, and decent, and told me he'd booked the lawn service for the season, proud of solving something I hadn't asked him to solve. "You look happy," he said, like a discovery he didn't know he was allowed to make. "I was useful today," I said. It was true, and it wasn't the whole truth, which is how most sins arrive dressed. On Saturday, Rowan texted a photo of a canvas catching late sun. "If you ever want to see the gallery after hours, I'll be there late, installing the threshold exhibit." I stared at the message until my tea went cold. After hours. 2 words that rearranged the furniture in my chest. I typed, "I'll bring coffee," then deleted it. Then wrote, "I'll bring cinnamon rolls," and quiet. The gallery at night felt like a chapel that trusted us with its hush. He moved ladders and checked angles and asked my opinion about the spacing of a triptych that showed a storm completing itself. What do you think? He asked. I think the middle wants to be closer to the end, I said, and we both felt the room hear us. We ate cinnamon rolls sitting on the floor, our knees almost touching, and for the first time in years, I did not measure my breathing against anyone else's sleep. We didn't kiss that night. He walked me to the door, and I remembered every hallway I had ever stood in waiting for a decision to choose me. Good night, Leela, he said, my name as gentle as wind through linen. Good night, I said, and went home to a living room that seemed to hold its own breath. There is a room in every city that exists only for secrets. Ours was a former framing studio above a florist, with windows that watched the river unlearn its ice. We told ourselves it was for safety, neutral ground, no history, a place where nothing framed us but the light. But what we wanted was a door that locked from the inside and a clock that didn't judge. The florist, a woman with kind eyes who didn't ask questions she'd already answered in her own life, handed me the key and said, be careful of the back stair, it remembers falls. The first time, we didn't know where to put our hands, the way hikers don't know where to stand at a stunning cliff. In awe, afraid, alive. When he kissed me, his mouth asked permission the way good weather asks farmers if they're ready. My body, this body that had been inventory and anchor and long-suffering miracle, answered with a sound I didn't know belonged to me anymore. I kept thinking, I should feel shame, but shame is loud and this felt like listening, and hunger, yes, but hunger that brought a chair and asked to talk. In the borrowed room, we developed rituals. A thermos of coffee with cardamom, a bowl of lemons on the windowsill because their light felt like a decision we weren't brave enough to make in other rooms. A playlist we never played anywhere else. He brought me a sketchbook and wrote on the first page, "For the weather you refuse to ignore," and I drew the feeling of a door opening without asking permission. We learned each other's maps, where grief had taken root, where fear had built fences, where joy still remembered the way. I told him about the years when our daughter, Eden, was small and Victor, and I were two halves of the same courage. The way sleep deprivation also made us holy. He told me about standing in the ICU when his mother died and promising himself he would never again be the last to arrive at the truth. We were careful with names, careful with time, not careful with hunger. The room smelled like citrus and old wood and the thin, bright edge of a secret. At home, I tried to be kinder, softer, more present, as if generosity could launder a lie. Victor noticed, and the noticing made me both grateful and endangered. He suggested we repaint the bedroom in a color called pearl morning, and I said yes, hearing the soft animal of my life stirring, asking to be fed what wouldn't kill it. At night, I lay awake, listening to Victor breathe, counting the beats between who I had been and who the borrowed room kept teaching me to be. The receipt lived in my wallet like a tiny loaded question. 2 hours, room 2B, paid in cash. I rehearsed the story I would tell if asked, helping the florist after hours, prepping frames for the fundraiser, practicing a kindness that felt almost true. Secrets are muscles. Use them and they grow, starve them and they gnaw. One afternoon I arrived to find Rowan silent, looking at the river as if waiting for it to confess something. What's your worst fear? He asked. I said that I'll become a cautionary tale told by people who have never been hungry. He nodded. Mine is that I will ask too little of this life and call it wisdom. We stood there, quiet, while the river remembered how to be sky. The unraveling did not choose drama. It chose ordinary daylight. Victor borrowed my car to pick up a fixture from the hardware store and found the key to the borrowed room in the ashtray where I kept quarters for parking. Small, gold, and stamped with the name of the framing studio like a confession that couldn't stop whispering. He set it on the kitchen table and waited for me, the way people wait for storms after the weather alert has already sounded. How long? He asked, when I walked in with a bag of oranges like a prop from a play where I had mistaken my role. Months, I said, because there are some numbers that, if spoken, become architecture. He nodded, looked at the bowl of lemons on the windowsill, and said nothing for a long time, which is a language I had never learned to be fluent in. Finally, is it love? The question was a key that opened a room where every version of me waited, hands folded, eyes bright. It's a reminder, I said, and watched his face register the cruelty of a truth told cleanly. Of what? Of the parts of me I kept in storage because they didn't match the furniture. He exhaled, a sound like winter giving up on being brave. We built this, he said, gesturing to decades of good, to the soft, beautiful, dignified accumulation of a life no one would be ashamed of. We did, I said, and I lost my name inside it. He asked me to end it or to leave, not as an ultimatum, but as a request to stop living on two weather maps. I said I would end it. I meant it the way a person means they won't cry during a eulogy. I went to the borrowed room and told Rowan that love without a future is a kind of shoreline, beautiful, fixed, and cruel. He didn't argue. He stood with his hands in his pockets like a man meeting a wave he couldn't negotiate. I don't want to be a secret, he said, simple as bread. You aren't, I said, and it felt true and useless. We said goodbye in the way people do when they have no clean box for the thing they hold. He pressed a lemon into my palm like a benediction or a dare. For light, he said. I walked home a stranger inside my own outline. Victor was in the yard, raking leaves into obedient piles, the lawn mower humming beside him like proof that a life can be maintained into goodness. He looked up, and the look on his face made me consider who deserves the truth and who can survive it. That night, sleep would not choose me. I sat at the kitchen table until the window grew a pale border of morning, and I realized that I had not ruined my marriage by wanting. I had ruined it by starving and then calling the first bite a miracle. We tried, which is a verb that deserves more hymns than it receives. Therapy, drives with the windows down. Dinners where we asked each other questions like we were on a first date with our own history. I learned that Victor felt abandoned when I was efficient, that he read my competence as a door closing. He learned that I experienced his pragmatism as a kindness that forgot to ask for my favorite color. We practiced turning toward instead of away, even when the turning made us dizzy. Eden flew home for a weekend and brought the man she loved, a gentle pharmacist who listened more than he spoke, and in them I saw the sweet, foolish bravery of beginnings. Over brunch, Eden said, "You look different, Mom, like you're here and far away at the same time," and I felt a tenderness for the girl who had survived me. I wanted to tell her that longing is a weather and some of us are born barometers. Instead, I passed the lemon curd and asked about her new apartment. I saw Rowan at the gallery opening for Threshold, standing near the painting of the woman and the door. We did not touch. We did not speak alone. Our eyes met in a way that said, "We were real and we are over and truth has hands." He looked well tired in the honest way, not in the haunted way, and I felt both relief and the soft mourning reserved for futures that made sense and would not happen. Victor stood beside me steady, his presence a harbor I was learning again how to navigate without resenting the safety. At home, we cooked dinner together. Onion, garlic, lemon zest, the pan singing like a small joy. "I'm angry sometimes," Victor said, mincing his confession as finely as the herbs. "And sometimes I'm just scared." I nodded. "Me too," I said. "Also grateful, also tired, also awake." We ate in companionable weather, clouds moving, sun attempting, rain holding back. I stopped going to the borrowed room and started taking long walks that looped past the river and through the city's oldest park, where a plaque honored a tree that had survived lightning and a century of lovers' initials. I ran my fingers over the scarred bark and thought, perhaps survival is not refusing damage but insisting on growth anyway. I wrote in the sketchbook, "Today's forecast, variable, carry an umbrella and a willingness to forgive." The spring my name came back to me was the spring the lemon tree on our windowsill began to bear fruit that smelled like a sun I had not stood under for years. I baked a lemon cake for Eden's engagement dinner, and when I dusted it with sugar, I felt something inside me set down its heavy bag and rest. Victor came into the kitchen and touched my shoulder, a small, present touch that asked nothing but offered notice. And for once I didn't flinch from being seen where I stood. We were not fixed, because people are not vases that crack only once. We were learning the daily work of loyalty, the kind that tastes like choosing the same table and asking better questions. Sometimes I cried in the shower, not from guilt but from the wild relief of telling the truth even when it cost. Sometimes Victor stayed late at work because being near me made his anger and love argue too loudly in the car. We let the weather be the weather without pretending it was always a good day for a picnic. Rowan sent a postcard from a residency in the desert. A photograph of a door cut into a wall of red stone, opening onto nothing but sky. On the back, "May your thresholds lead you home." I put it in a drawer with ticket stubs and letters, and a tiny brass key I never returned, not because I wanted to keep the room, but because I wanted to remember the language it taught me. Say what you want. Don't apologize for breathing. Bring lemons. On the first warm night of June, Victor and I ate on the porch while the neighborhood unlearned winter. He told me a story about his childhood dog that I'd somehow never heard, and we laughed at the way memory edits for survival. What do you want, Leela? He asked at dusk, not as a test, but as an offering. To choose this, I said, touching his hand, and to keep the door open between us, even when the weather changes. Later, alone in the kitchen, I stood with the window open, listening to a house that finally said my name back. I sliced a lemon and pressed the rind between my fingers, releasing light. I thought of the woman in the painting and realized she hadn't been facing away. She had been listening for her own footsteps. I rinsed the knife, set it down, and in that small, ordinary sound, I heard the music of a life that had not ended, only turned. Did, only turned.